Hello and welcome to the Pivot Point podcast. This podcast has been designed to understand leaders in the cybersecurity industry, not from a technical standpoint, but from a more of a human one. We want to make sense of the pivotal moments in their careers through the decisions and character traits they've developed. And hopefully this will provide some guidance and advice to individuals starting out their careers in security, those looking for answers as you may be at that point in your career, or those just looking for something interesting to listen to. I'm your host, Bradley Borton, and today I have Nick Silver with me. Nick is currently a head of DevSecOps at Q2, a financial technology company based in Austin. The reason I wanted to bring Nick on the show is because he's someone I feel that he knows himself pretty well and constantly looks for ways to better himself. And that's apparent through some of the decisions that he's made throughout his career. So Nick, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
No worries. So I want to go back to our conversation a few weeks ago, actually. And you mentioned to me two stories. One was on White Hat, where it sounds like, that's where you started out your career in security and you got a lot of valuable knowledge there. But also one where you found your passion in technology. It was a story around your friend coded the barcode system for a local library. I guess. Sure. To put that sort of onto you, where do you feel in your career was that sort of pivotal moment, that point where you go, yeah, this is what I'm going to do now, and I really like this. So where's that moment for you?
Yeah, I think my interest in computers really started at a pretty young age. Like you mentioned, the story about the local library was actually when I was in middle school, and I grew up in a pretty rural part of Maryland where I would say there weren't a lot of opportunities for advanced. Yep. Traditional educational opportunities for technology. At the time, AP Computer Science, for example, in Mount Airy, Maryland, was not very relevant. Yeah, by today's computing standards. Yeah. But it definitely planted that bug in me at a pretty young age. And then, yeah, like you said, the opportunity at White Hat was really what kind of cemented my interest and my passion in the field. Security was something that I latched onto. I studied computer science in school and undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to either do graphics or security. And so there was sort of this decision that I needed to make early on about which domain I felt like was the best for me. And and then, yeah, the experience that I got at White Hat was really just, I'm very blessed and I consider myself very fortunate to have encountered that at such a young point in my career, because it, like I said, it really did kind of crystallize things for me.
Yeah. And you said obviously graphics or security there.
Yeah.
How did you come to that decision to go for security? What was it? What was the instigator? What was the this is the route I'm going to go?
Yeah, just sort of a perverse excitement with breaking things, I would say. It was something that, when we studied buffer overflows, memory corruption vulnerabilities in college, I just said, man, this is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I had a kind of this interest in math and computers, and obviously there are so many disciplines, especially nowadays, where those two really kind of coalesce. But at the time, I mean, things like data science, they're nowhere where they are today. But graphics was a very math-heavy field. There's a lot of critical math skills that you need to be successful in that. And then on the security side, I think math's one of those things where I don't know how often you're going to solve, linear equations in the security industry today, but if you are very passionate about cryptography, for example, there are some advanced math concepts that will certainly come into play. But yeah, for me, it was that first time when I just learned, how to exploit a memory corruption issue. I said, man, this is pretty cool. And it was that kind of that right mix of problem solving, just cool factor. There was, I don't know, I was hooked.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of leads me into my next question, because that fundamentally you have this analytical mindset, right? And that sort of tees you up for a good career in security. But what sort of character traits would you say that you have, or would you say that you need, so to speak, to be able to have a successful career in security? And also, what ones have you developed throughout as well to sort of continue that question?
Yeah, humility. This is something you and I talked about, Brad, last time. It sounds very weird to say, oh, I'm very humble, but I do really believe that being arrogant in the security industry is setting yourself up for an embarrassment. There's just too much to know about a lot of different things. And so whenever somebody really feels like they've got nothing left to learn, they're wrong. And that's my opinion. And so not being afraid to admit to yourself, first and foremost, what it is that you are strong in, where you have areas to improve, being able to admit that to others. There are so many people that you can reach out to, especially, today it's really changed. There's not like this hidden underground community of hackers. Everyone's out there in the light of day. And so there's so many opportunities to reach out to other people and say, can you teach me more about, your area of research, what you're really passionate about? And so that humility, I really think, is critical to advancing one's learning in the space.
Yeah, and is that something you did as well then, pretty early on in your career, reaching out to individuals and asking for that sort of leg up, that piece of advice to say, what do I do next? Where do I go?
Yeah, I was pretty late to the Twitter game. To be honest with you, even today,
Me too.
I really hate
hate
Twitter.
as well, yeah. I'm not a
I
fan.
really do.
Yeah.
But I will say that in terms of connecting people and kind of getting little small tidbits of information, it is a pretty powerful tool. And so there's been a few points in my career where I've had to revisit the Twitterverse and just swallow that pill and say, you know what, I'm doing this because I do recognize it as a valuable channel for information. And then I kind of tune out all the other stuff I'm not interested in, what people are cooking that day or whatever. But yeah, reaching out to people early on. I mean, it's funny because there are so many niches within security, and we come up every time there's a new domain, we just tack on security to the end of it, right? Oh, containers are a new thing.
Yeah, security.
Container security now, right?
Yeah.
But any of these domains, there's specializations and niches. And I remember, we at White Hat, for example, we had a pretty large threat research center. At the tail end when I was leaving, there was over 100 people. And so, as you can imagine, people naturally will gravitate to those things that they're really interested in. And one individual in particular that comes to mind is we had a guy we called the Flash Man, Jason Calvert, because he got CVEs published for these very very detailed Flash vulnerabilities. And you reach out and say, hey, Jason, can you teach me more about that? And I'm rambling on and on, but yeah, certainly something that cool. I got in the habit of early on.
I think that's interesting as well, because that's something that, especially naturally, as technology folks naturally are somewhat introverted. Finding a pen tester that is an extrovert is dangerous. Worry about those ones, but naturally, it's an introverted sort of personality that you have. So having that, putting yourself in that vulnerable situation of hey, can you give me some advice? Can you give me some help? That's something that I think is a character trait that I think obviously you highlighted, is one that's very, very important and has kind of given you legs up throughout your career. I guess to sort of lead on from that, what sort of habits would you say that, what sort of daily, weekly kind of habits do you have that, sort of sets you up for a good day, for a good week, for a successful career?
Yeah. Daily habits for me, and weekly habits. So one of them, just because of where I'm at in my current role, there's not too much of my daily job duties that require me to program. However, I see software engineering as just a critical skill in any role within security today, or just in IT in general. And so I have to find opportunities for daily practice for that, whether it's just me hacking together a little Python script to even help me with my daily administrative tasks, things like communicating to a Jira API. There's little things that I can do to try to keep my skills sharp, that are important to practice on a daily basis. And then on a weekly basis, it's just staying current with the latest attacks, news that's out there. There's one mailing list in particular. I don't know if I'm supposed to be plugging specifics or not.
Do it, by all means, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's one that's a fantastic resource for API security. There's APIsecurity.io has a mailer that is put out that's fantastic. And every week it's kind of a roundup of new tools, new techniques, as well as high profile vulnerabilities. They were just covering the Parler API vulnerability recently. And so, staying apprised of what's happening in the industry, just because everything is moving so quickly, that's certainly a weekly practice that I try to be in the good habit of.
Yeah, and that's good. And I think, I think little things like that, little tidbits like that are very important to, again, offer guidance and advice, right? I think that's sort of what people are looking for. And hopefully, that's sort of someone going to take away from this podcast and go, you know what, I'm going to go on that and check it out, because that's ultimately the reason why we're doing this. So I guess to kind of continue from there, I'm interested to dive into sort of more around your personality, and you touched on the humility side, but I think there's a few extra character traits that you have that I think have got you to where you're at. And I think one that I wanted to highlight on was when we first spoke a while ago. I quickly picked up that each time you've progressed through your career, you've kind of gone, okay, I haven't got this skill set. Let me do this now. So I guess, how have you done that? Like, how have you gone, okay, I haven't quite got this skill set. This is what I need now, and then I'm going to go and find and get it. Like, how have you gone out and done that?
Yeah, excellent question. All right, I guess there's a lot to unpack there.
It's a lot, man. Yeah, we've got a while, so let's lock in.
I mean, I think as in my current role now as a hiring manager too, I can tell you that we place high emphasis on individuals that have demonstrated that they are lifelong learners, and it's this acknowledgement that because of the pace at which technology changes. I don't care if you have a top degree from a top university a decade ago. I mean, that's great. I'm proud of you for doing that. But if you haven't studied anything in the last 10 years, you're already a dinosaur. Yeah, I mean, 10 years is an eternity in our space. So you have to demonstrate to me that you acknowledge this fact and that you're willing to put in the time, energy, and effort to continue to better yourself. And so how was I able to do this? I think I was very fortunate that, and it's not like it's worked out this way everywhere. There are some roles where there's a very clear-cut definition of they want you to show up and they want you to pull this lever. And if you don't have experience pulling that lever, you're maybe not the right candidate for them. Yeah. But I think if that's not what you're looking for, then as a candidate, you also need to kind of move on and evaluate other opportunities. For me, it was always, finding those opportunities where I can demonstrate to my employer that yes, I have this ability to learn, even if there's some function of the job role that I haven't done previously. I'm confident in my ability to get in there and learn what I need to learn to be successful. And that's something where I see this all the time when we talk about tools. A classic example of this is modern day cloud platforms, right? And you'll see all these postings out there where it's like, well, we want 5 years of GCP or Azure or AWS experience. Yeah. And someone might come along and they say, well, yeah, I've only really worked hands-on in AWS. And I'll see recruiters say, well, sorry, we're really an Azure shop. And that's such a loss to me, because you're potentially missing out on a candidate where it's like, really, does that cloud provider have compute? Do they have networking? Do they have storage? Like a lot of these principles are going to cross-pollinate. Right? Yeah. Maybe you just, you learn some terminology differences and a few little nuances, but being able to demonstrate to employers that you are a lifelong learner, and it's going to do a couple things, not just for your employer, but I think it's a muscle like anything else that needs to be exercised. It will build your confidence the more that you learn. I'll see people where maybe they're afraid to take on a really challenging certification. They're lacking some of that confidence, and maybe they haven't completed any certifications ever or in several years. And it's one of those things where there's a momentum to this as you continue to develop that learning muscle. I believe it'll increase your confidence.
Yeah, and it's actually cool you say that, because you pick that up through the way in which you speak. You sound very self-assured and confident in your approach and what you know and what don't you know, which I think knowing what you don't know is more important than knowing what you know. So how would you, to give someone a little bit of confidence, to give someone that sort of a little bit of a pick me up to go, okay, I have got the ability to do this. What advice would you offer someone there?
Yeah, I think everyone's maybe wired a little differently, but if I'm not imprinting too much of my own personal feelings on the industry, I do think that there's a lot of imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
because what we do is, I think as practitioners, a lot of times we assume that everyone knows what we know. And then if there's anything that that person knows, when we're sitting there going, gosh, I didn't know that. You have this mental model where you assume that everyone knows everything you know, and anything that they say that you didn't know is just that much extra. And the reality is it's just not true, right?
Yeah.
I saw this again. I keep going back to the well here with White Hat, but at White Hat, we were very specialized with web application security,
Hmm.
right? And that was, the niche that we played in. And so you saw, we developed experts in classical web application attacks. And there was this prevailing feeling that a lot of people felt like they weren't as well rounded in some of these other areas. And they would say things like, oh, well, web application security is easy. And I think until you go and you talk to people who don't have web application security experience, you just don't know yet that
Yeah.
what you have is actually deep expertise in a domain that not everyone has. So that's my encouragement to folks is don't discount the experience that you have. Don't assume that what you have is shared knowledge across everyone, because it's really not. And if you feel that way, go meet people that aren't like you and just share with each other, talk,
Definitely.
and I think that realization will hopefully come to you.
Yeah, I think character traits sort of angle us into the positions we're in. So obviously for me, I would like to say I'm pretty analytical as it is. I'm pretty detail orientated and a bit of an extrovert, which makes me a good position to be a good headhunter. Obviously, your mindset very analytical, self confident. Puts you in a great position to where you're at. Um, I guess for someone to understand a bit more around who they are and what they're good at. Um, and obviously we've found that your analytical mind is better for your skill set. So would you say there's certain character traits that are better for certain domains in security? For instance, someone in AppSec as opposed to someone on the compliance side, they're going to think differently. They're wired differently, right? So I guess if you are going to put into a silo, so to speak, what sort of character traits would you put someone on, let's say engineering, someone on, let's say
Mhm.
operations, and then someone on compliance?
Yeah, great question. Again, I don't know that I'm not an expert in all
all,
those other
all,
domains, but I'll take a stab at it, I guess.
all your
Um,
opinions are welcome. This is an
yeah.
open opinion forum, is what this is.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned compliance. This touched on a recent experience, so maybe I'll start there. I think that people that are going to benefit in the compliance space are detail oriented,
Hmm.
certainly. When I meet someone that's a really good auditor or a really good compliance analyst, I used to think I was detail oriented, and then I talk to these people and I go,
Yeah,
oh no, okay,
yeah,
I
yeah,
get it
yeah.
now.
You're in the right market.
Yeah, and there's a lot of critical language skills there, where it's like really interpreting controls and standards documents, and then asking those follow-up questions. So yeah, detailed oriented qualities I think would serve someone very, very well there. When it comes to engineering, I mean, problem solving and that analytical mindset is critical, right? This is something that I think it's interesting because when you think about penetration testers or people that have the bulk of their experience in breaking things,
Hmm.
kind of what I oversimplify as breakers instead of builders, I think that they are very good at kind of contrarian thinking, where they don't assume they don't assume anything, they don't take anything for granted. So you're being presented an application, say, and it's kind of directing you down this natural flow. The
Hmm.
person that's a really good breaker says, well, what if I don't want to do that? What if I want to skip to this step in this multi-step form? And they're just constantly, it sounds so cliche, but kind of thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
um, and then engineers, yeah, the same skill set really applies equally there, because there's so many problems that just come up in a day-to-day context, where you just there isn't like a run book for an engineer to follow, say, oh, well, when this thing breaks. I need to follow steps X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
They have to apply those critical thinking skills and really try to figure out what the problem is. But
Yeah,
I'm not
and I
sure I
think
really answered your question. I feel like that was a
kind
lot
of,
of
yeah. I
very,
mean, that's a good.
yeah,
It's good to get your thoughts as well, because again, I think as I said to you, hopefully people listening to this are going to be looking for some sort of advice, a little bit of a step up. Like I spoke to a number of people even over the last few weeks. Brad, how do I get into here? Can you review this for me? Can you look at that? And it's even little things like, a guy I've recently spoken with was reaching out to the CISO of Google, and he was writing a fairly sort of long-winded letter, and I was like, look, this guy's got a fair amount of time on his hands. He's not going to read your letter. The detail, it was very detail orientated, because he wants to actually move into the compliance space, believe it or not. So it's nice little send off there. But the first thing I said to him, I said, to be blunt, this is too much. The first thing we want to get out of it is, what's the objective? What are you trying to achieve? And it started off with just an overview of who he was and what he's about. And I said to him, the first thing that you see from this is what are you trying to sell me? What are you trying to give me here? What are you trying to offer me? And that's sort of a typical sort of approach, because obviously everyone who reaches out to people, typically you're trying to sell something or you want something, right?
right.
And that sort of me giving him that guidance and sort of offering him that was something actually that it seems to have taken on quite well, and he's going to run with it. But one thing I wanted to touch on, I think, is discipline. And discipline is very important in everyone everyday lives. But obviously it's extremely important in security. Discipline is staying on the task, staying on the matter, but keeping on that as well. Not sort of letting things just sort of slip by the wayside. So for someone listening to this, struggling with discipline, what advice would you offer? What advice could you give, that whether something's helped you out, whether that's sort of a daily tracker or a weekly tracker of some sort, or even little things that you do to help you stay sort of on the money and on point? Like what advice would you offer?
Yeah, struggling with discipline in what context, Brad?
I guess just in general, sort of struggling with sort of staying focused on the task, whether it's discipline towards getting a job, whether it's discipline towards staying on protecting the company in that sense, or just, I guess, discipline is I suppose that's quite an ambiguous question, but I think it's quite an important one as well, because I think discipline is one thing that a lot of people struggle to sort of keep up with. I think people have the initial energy and stay focused on it and go, okay, for the first week I'm going to do this, and then it just slips by the wayside. So what sort of advice could you offer to keep someone on top of things and on it?
Another great question. For me, and I think especially when I reflect back on 2020 and what a year it's been, a lot of people with their work situation kind of getting disrupted. Maybe you were in an office, maybe you had to move for, work remotely. Maybe you were unfortunately laid off and you had to, re-enter a job market in a really, really trying time. For me, I think when I think about discipline, I think about things that we want to do. And then for whatever reason, we make excuses about life getting in the way. I'm certainly not immune to that. Even if it's just things in my personal life, diet, exercise, you name it. But I think about the 30 days to make a habit.
Okay.
I think that's something that's really, sometimes you have to kind of fake it until you make it. I'm a big believer in that, where if there's a discipline in your life that you're looking to turn into a habit, it's not going to feel natural on day 1 or day 2 or day 3 even. But if you force yourself to kind of do it and keep reminding yourself of what it is that why you set out to do that in the first place, remind yourself of that goal, then hopefully that'll provide enough encouragement to stay with it long enough so that it becomes a habit. That's the best I can offer there. And like I said,
that's good.
It's not like easy. That. It's definitely not easy.
It's not. And I think, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask it, because I think, one thing that 2020 has taught us is a lot can change very quickly. And we've all been sort of thrust in these situations of in this box that we're all in, and trying to get by and doing it. So staying sort of on top of things, with discipline is so important to success, your own personal success and things as well. But you mentioned on 2020, I'm curious to understand if there's anything that you feel that you've done differently since sort of being in a working environment to being in a remote working environment entirely. You
Yeah.
know, what have you found success with? What have you not found success with? Like, what have you done that's different to what you did in 2019?
Yeah, and full disclosure here, one of the big reasons why I took the job at Q2, and there were a lot of reasons, but high on my criteria list was wanting to be back in person at headquarters for a company. I had worked at several places prior where I was either a remote employee or I was working at a satellite office that wasn't, I felt like I was disconnected from kind of the beating heart of things. And so
Mm.
it's kind of ironic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because of everything that happened last year. I would say I was one of those people that didn't work very well remotely. And
yeah.
so some things that I've tried to implement for me to just kind of change things up. Number one, I have to get out of my house.
Yeah.
Listen, I understand we're in the middle of a pandemic and you need to do it safely. But I know a lot of people that are struggling because when you're just confined inside your four walls. So if you can do it, if you can follow your local guidelines and you can get outside in a safe way and just see some sunshine, get
Hmm.
some vitamin D, I
Yeah.
think it'll do wonders for the mental state. That's also just kind of keeping things kind of fresh with my team where sometimes I have the fortune of living close to a park nearby, and so if I can do a one-on-one with a team member, say while I'm taking a walk and getting a little bit of exercise going,
Yeah.
that feels great for me. These are really practical low-level things that have just been for
I
me. Is
mean,
that kind of what you were
that's
interested
what
in,
we
Brad?
want.
Or
Yeah, that's exactly what we
yeah.
want. You know, to sort of jump into that for something myself. You know, I think a number of different reasons. The back end of last year was quite tough for me. It was a weird time. Obviously, I'm English, as I think everyone's got this by now. And you know, not being able to go home see my family kind of got to me a little bit at the back end of the year, and you kind of look at it. I'm again a very analytical person. I sort of like to sort of be. I feel like I'd like to say I'm very self-aware and understand, you know, what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And my brain just started kind of getting away with me. And one thing that really helped me actually, and has been helping me quite a lot, is meditation. Um, and it's weird. I was one of the individuals that like, why do you want to meditate? That's weird. You know, you're just going to sit there in the corner and just sort of just stare at things and close your eyes. But it's something that's really helped me out. It's given me a lot more sort of self-confidence. It's given me a lot more motivation. I sleep better. You know, I'm staying on task a lot more. I'm a hell of a lot more focused. And it's something that I think, you know, I was looking into ways. I've read a lot of sort of, I wouldn't say self-healing books, but I've read a lot of books that, you know, things like The Power of Now and what was the other one? Talking to Strangers, another interesting one I was listening to, a Malcolm Gladwell book. And those books sort of gave me a lot of kind of insight into various things. But, you know, I wanted to kind of declutter my head, and meditation really helped out. But to lead on from that, like, is there any books that you've read or that you can kind of, you know, say, hey, this is actually something that was quite important to me throughout my, you know, or some point in my career where I was looking for a bit of guidance or advice, you know, this book helped me out, or even this movie or whatever. Like, what is there anything that you've leaned on, you know, in your career through times of potential crisis or issue or matter or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. I think when the very first time that I was a manager, there's kind of that's a critical inflection point. I don't know what happened to my Zoom. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're still here.
Okay, there it is.
There's always
Yeah,
one technical glitch, don't worry.
yeah, always at least one, right? But yeah, Four Disciplines of Execution by Sean Covey. It's an older book now, but and there's a lot of management books that focus on, kind of planning and things like that. And if you are in a frontline manager position, it's something that that really impacted me early on in my career. Talking about things, I'm not going to give a full book review, but things like
Mhm.
leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators, and really the concept of a wildly important goal. There's so many there are so many things that you can take on in a day for your team, and sometimes you have to say no to a good idea
Yep.
because you know that the team's at capacity, and you really have to say yes to those wildly important things. And so when we think about execution, a lot of times it's like, okay, are we just working on too many things? Do we need to kind of refocus on what's wildly important? That's something that I still carry with me to this day.
Really, I'll look into that as well. And I guess to round off the podcast here, if you were to go back to Nick, sort of, in fact, there's two times here I think is going to be interesting. So if you could go back to the point when you was in high school and you were watching your friend code that library system you were talking about, and also the point where you finished your degree, or you wrapped up the degree in at Georgia Tech, what advice would you give a younger self at those points?
Yeah, better exposure. I mean, the guy that told me that, or that taught me basically that you could create this library barcode system, that just kind of blew my mind. But then I think I suffered a little bit from small pond scenario. I think I shared with you
Yeah,
the story that in my high school, we wrote programs down on paper, and this was in 2005. This wasn't like index cards from the 70s. This was like 2005. You had to write programs down on paper before you were allowed to go and sit at the computer, which is just insane.
that is
And so
crazy.
I think the advice I would have given my younger self there was to get more exposure to what life looks like in a more
Hmm.
normal, modern
Yeah,
computing context at a much younger age. Um, the other piece of advice I think I would have given is that you really have to think about what's going to work well for you in terms of learning. I think I went into college with this with some unmet expectations about what I would get out of the experience.
hmm,
um, and so really kind of, if I had identified some things earlier on in my life about what it would take to learn some of these things I was really interested in learning, I think that I would have been well served by that.
yeah. No, I like that as well. And I think that's a good way to sort of round off the pod here as well, and sort of some guidance and advice, because I think everyone's asking a lot of questions, and you've given us a lot of some of your own opinions and a lot of good sort of good facts as well in there. So yeah, this has been fun. Really appreciate your time here, and looking forward to getting this published and putting this out, and hopefully you sort of, we can lean on you as well in sort of create a community here of individuals looking for answers and questions, and hopefully we can have you as a bit of a thought leader in the process. So yeah, really
Yeah.
looking forward to that, and appreciate everything.
Thank you, Brad. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward. If anyone wants to reach out and kind of have cyber conversations or anything like that, and if there's ever anything I can do to help, please let me know.